We're told that assisted suicide will always be safe, rare, and surrounded by strict safeguards. That it will only ever apply to those who freely and explicitly request it. But the reality in countries that have taken this path tells a very different story. Take the Netherlands. Assisted suicide began there with narrow limits and promises of control. Doctors insisted it would be tightly regulated, reported, and only available for those who asked for it. Yet today, euthanasia makes up nearly 1 in every 20 deaths, almost 10,000 people every year. And not all of them consented. As our parliaments are on the brink of passing assisted suicide laws, it looks as if this is exactly where we are headed. I'm Ben Weller, and this is Viewpoint. A government-commissioned study in the Netherlands in 2021 found that out of the 9,799 assisted deaths, over 9,000 were by euthanasia, 245 by assisted suicide, and 517 cases where life was ended without explicit request. That's more than 500 people, mothers, fathers, grandparents, killed without ever asking to die. This practice has a name: LAW, life ending without request. Doctors in the Netherlands admit this themselves in confidential surveys. Those same surveys show persistent underreporting, with many deaths never recorded as euthanasia at all. And the trend is rising. Involuntary euthanasia is increasing. This is the slippery slope in action. What begins with choice ends with lives taken without consent. Belgium went even further. In 2002, euthanasia was introduced for adults in exceptional cases. Politicians reassured the public it would be narrow, rare, and carefully controlled. Just 12 years later, Parliament extended it to children with no age limit. Belgium became the first country in the world where even minors can legally be euthanized. Safeguards designed to protect the young were swept away barely a decade after the first laws were passed. There are also disturbing reports of euthanasia patients in Belgium having their organs harvested for transplant, raising profound questions about whether vulnerable people are being seen as lives to protect or just resources to exploit. Meanwhile, Canada shows how quickly the slippery slope can become freefall. In 2016, Canada legalized medical assistance in dying, or MAID, as a supposedly compassionate option for those who were terminally ill and near death. Politicians promised the criteria would stay narrow and carefully focused. That didn't happen. Only a few years later, eligibility was expanded to people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and psychiatric conditions. Reports now describe citizens seeking death because they can't afford proper housing or care. Veterans of PTSD have been offered assisted suicide instead of counselling or disability assistance. The numbers are staggering. In 2022 alone, 13,000 Canadians died under MAID, more than the population of most UK towns. Experts now warn it is on track to become the third leading cause of death in that country. What began as a law for the dying is now a system offering death to the vulnerable and the poor and the mentally ill. In the Canadian province of Quebec, the expansion has been ever more rapid. In just 5 years, assisted deaths rose from 638 in 2016 to more than 3,600 by 2021. Quebec alone now accounts for nearly half of all MAID deaths in Canada. In France, pressure is building for assisted suicide laws. Polls show majority support, and President Emmanuel Macron has signalled his willingness to legislate. Already the debate is shifting from terminal illness to unbearable suffering, echoing the trajectory of the Netherlands and Belgium. This is not just confined to certain parts of Europe or North America. Colombia legalized euthanasia in 1997 through a court ruling, originally only for terminal illnesses. By 2021, the court expanded it to non-terminal conditions. In 2022, it went further still, authorizing at-home assisted suicide, effectively an adult pills by post. What began as a narrow judicial exception has become one of the most permissive euthanasia regimes in the world. And now, as if these examples weren't alarming enough, new technologies are emerging that take the culture of death even further. Australian activist Dr. Philip Nitschke, often called Dr. Death, has developed the sarcopod, a 3D printed suicide capsule filled with nitrogen gas, activated by the occupant from within. Promoted as a peaceful and dignified way to die, its first use in Switzerland ended in tragedy, suspicion, and cover-up. A 64-year-old American woman became the first to enter the pod. A post-mortem later revealed unexplained strangulation marks on her neck. Swiss prosecutors even suggested possible homicide. The head of the assisted dying group involved, Dr. Florian Willett, was arrested and later died by assisted suicide himself, thereby escaping the fallout from the scandal surrounding the case. Despite this, Dr. Nitschke insists he wants to bring his suicide pods to the UK if our parliaments pass their assisted suicide bills. So, a device with a proven track record of failure, already linked to controversy and likely homicide, could soon be available here. This is the inevitable direction of travel once assisted suicide is legalized. The safeguards collapse, the boundaries fall, and human life itself becomes something entirely disposable and utilitarian. Every society is built on certain moral foundations. Archetypal ones have always held that the most basic is that innocent human life should never be deliberately taken. Assisted suicide scuppers that principle. Ethically, it redefines medicine. The Hippocratic Oath bound doctors to heal, never to kill. Assisted suicide rips that up too. Once doctors are authorized and possibly bound to end life, the line between care and harm is blurred, if not completely destroyed. Socially, it corrodes solidarity. True compassion means standing with someone in suffering, offering care, presence, and support. Assisted suicide confuses compassion with elimination, treating the person as the problem rather than the illness. Philosophically, it introduces a chilling logic that some lives are no longer worth living, that they're barren of the capacity to feel any joy. Once that threshold is crossed, there is no obvious stopping point. If terminal illness is today, why not chronic illness tomorrow? If adults today, why not children tomorrow? This isn't fear-mongering, it's a lived reality in every country that has travelled this road. The choice before us is stark. Uphold the intrinsic value of every life, or redefine life's worth according to circumstance. Recent history shows that once we begin down the latter path, there is no turning back. There's a better way, one rooted in the elimination of suffering, not the elimination of the sufferer. Modern medicine through palliative care can manage even the most severe pain, not just symptom control, but emotional and spiritual care through the UK's world-class hospice system. Let's remember, some people request assisted suicide not because their pain is uncontrollable, but because they feel abandoned, lonely, or a burden. In fact, over half of victims in Oregon say that being a burden was their biggest driver. That is a failure of society, not medicine. The answer is not a lethal dose. The answer is presence. It's families, neighbours, and communities saying, your life still matters, even in weakness and even in suffering. Expanding hospice access, training more specialists, and supporting carers, these are the steps that honour dignity. This is a step to building a culture that values all people until their natural end. Real compassion walks with people through suffering. It never abandons them. The better way is not death on demand, but life accompanied, upheld, and respected until its natural conclusion. The debate over assisted suicide is not about choice. It's about whether we want a society that sees people as vessels for financial gain or lives worthy of respect. Do we want a society where the sick, the elderly, and the disabled feel pressure to end their lives? Where machines like the sarcopod are held as progress? Where doctors are turned into agents of death? I prefer a society generous in care, in compassion, and in community. A society that stands with people in their darkest hour and says, "You're not a burden. You're not forgotten, but you're loved." Once we take the first step down the slope, there isn't turning back. So be bold and stand now. Give a resounding no to assisted suicide.